Thank you, Joy Castro, for joining us in Vanderbilt Special Collections. We're here to talk about book love today. Laura Miller wrote that the first book we fall in love with shapes us every bit as much as the first person we fall in love with. And this affects the choice that we make as adults. We hope you'll share your book loves with us and tell us a little bit about the first book you fell in love with.
I'm happy to. And I fell in love with the first book at the same time I fell in love with the first person, who was my cousin, my older cousin Daryl, and I was about 2 or 3 years old. And my favorite book was, at that time, The Little Engine That Could, children's classic, little golden book by Waddy Piper, which I came to understand later, I think is a pen name for a man, Monk, I think is his last name, and he was a Hungarian immigrant. And this book is designed to teach children the value of hard work and optimism, the little engine that could do it. And it certainly made an impression on me. I know this because it's the first book I can remember reading. And a friend who was getting a doctorate in educational psychology asked me this question: what's the first book you can remember reading? Because even if it's not the first book you actually read, supposedly the first one that leaves an impression is the one that chimes with your little nascent worldview. And so apparently this one struck me, and I read it again a few years ago, because I was like, oh, how curious that this book had an impression on me. What do I care about trains? I don't. And I read it, and the interesting thing is that all these big, mean, unhelpful trains in the story have the pronoun he. And the little blue train who cares about the toys and the children is a she. And this is how it is in the original book. And she goes up the mountain, and she does, I think I can, right? And she gets the toys to the other side, delivers them to the children, and everybody's happy. And I think, wow, what an impression this must have made on my tiny little girl mind, right? That at last, here's a little hero that I actually can identify with. And this is the 60s, right? 1969, 1970, we all know that books then, as many books now still for children, they feature boy protagonists, and girls have to cross-identify in order to have any kind of sense of heroism, right? But there was a girl train, and she was doing something good, and she was doing something good for others, and she never gave up, so I was being indoctrinated, but also it was empowering, apparently, for toddler Joy, and so this made a big impression on me. It was probably way earlier than maybe you want someone to talk about, but it did have an impact. So, yeah.
And how do you feel about the book now? You've said a little bit. But
I think it's a tool of the capitalist oppressor to make people work hard, never give up, and serve others. But I also believe in that. Work hard, never give up, and serve others. So I was effectively indoctrinated, and it's cheerful. It's a sweet book, and it's encouraging, and I've read it to my kids. So yeah.
Did you have a book that captured your imagination before you went to college as a reader, or as an early college student?
Yes, probably 2 before I went to college, and then once I was in college, a million. But before I went to college, so I grew up in sort of a reading home, but my parents only went through high school, and the books around the house, they were popular, mass market literature. My mother read John Jakes novels. So a book that captured my attention in I think it was middle school maybe, or younger probably, was A Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett, the classic. And this is a novel about grace and benevolence, and about transformation and imagination. And it's about someone whose circumstances were very lovely and then were very reduced. And then she, with her imagination, figured out a way, through great faith, to make them lovely again. And this was very helpful to me, because I had a difficult time as a child. And so this helped. And then also, I read the Helen McGinnis novel, Above Suspicion. And she's a great Cold War spy, thriller-y kind of, people running around the mountains in Europe. And this one, I think this one had So my background is as a Jehovah's Witness, and I was forbidden to go to college, and I was going to just be a housewife and make babies and serve Jehovah. This was the destiny that my parents had decided for me. And this was really a boring future, and I kept thinking about college instead. And Above Suspicion, this novel, had a college don, and I think Oxford or Cambridge or something, and his beautiful wife. And they went around, defeating, the evil people, fascists in Europe. I can't remember it very well, but, so it still had big sexist norms, but those were comfortable for my brain at that time. And I thought, oh, how wonderful to be like an intellectual and a professor, and then also to be a pretty wife. And I couldn't really articulate to myself that I wanted to be like both, or why should you have to be one or the other, or whatever. But this novel had an impression on me. And I did end up running away. I did end up going to college. And so it was just popular literature, but it sketched out a story for me that my own life wasn't furnishing. So I think it was important in that way.
Is there another book that set you on your professional path?
A million. Like I said, I just fell in love with literature in college, and mostly modernist literature, and mostly, not at first modernist literature by women, like Faulkner, Hemingway, Joyce, those were great to me initially, but then it was like, oh, Virginia Woolf, oh, Jean Rhys, Katherine Mansfield blows me out of the water, Zora Neale Hurston. So that whole period of radical literary experimentation, and all of a sudden an interest in subjectivity, interiority, trauma, right? Trauma from the war, trauma from personal events, like that kind of literary focus on those things was really meaningful and important to me. So and then I ended up getting a master's and a doctorate in modernist literature. So, yeah, and I teach that stuff today.
In your work that you just referred to, or is there one particular book that stands out to you as an early influence? Or?
I would say Katherine Mansfield's stories, her collected stories. They're just exquisite. What she does with language, nobody else had done. And we talk about James Joyce and Anton Chekhov as being like progenitors of the modern short story form. She was the third, who was, a founder of the modern short story, and she brought female experience to that story. So for me, her work is fantastic.
Thank you. Is there a book that you like to share with friends and family, or books that you work with?
I do, yes. It's When Will There Be Good News? It's a crime novel by Kate Atkinson. And Kate Atkinson is a brilliant literary writer. She beat out Salman Rushdie for the Whitbread Prize before she turned her hand to crime novels, right? So she was already producing literary work and getting national awards for that work. And then she's like, oh, I'm going to write crime. And so she produced this series of 4 crime novels, linked series. And the third one, When Will There Be Good News, is, I think, the most perfect. It does everything a great literary novel does, with character and voice and language and an incredibly intricate plot, but it's also suspense-filled and very compassionate and humane, and thinks about crime and justice in a very deep way. It's very moving and beautiful. So I'm always giving that to people because it's less intimidating than giving them like one of the classics, right? So give them a crime novel and they're like, oh, fun, easy, and they read it. So she's great, Kate Atkinson.
I'll remember that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about a gift book that you remember?
No. I'm sorry, I tried really hard. I can't remember any gift books. No, I have such particular taste that when people give me books, it's usually like men, right? So yeah, I don't have the right friends. They give me other things, right? My name is Joy Castro, and I'm at Vanderbilt this spring as the writer-in-residence. I'm teaching creative nonfiction here, and I'm originally from Miami, and currently I'm a professor of English and ethnic studies at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln.